since we are clear with everything else over here, we can turn everything off except for this particular component. You can just select everything and turn it off. After you have done that, you can always rename your number sliders so that you can understand what does what. So this particular number slider changes the first curvature and this number slider changes the bottom curvature. So you can actually name this by right clicking on it and change it to top curvature control, and let's change the bottom one to bottom curvature control. And press enter. So we have these 4 curvature controls that we have created. So you can actually let go of the other 2 because these are actually number sliders based on the list item components, but these 2 are the ones that you will require to change the curvature of your form, just like this. So once you're done with this much, now let's move ahead to the next part of our script. Now you can actually double click and type brep and bring in the brep component, and you can place your surface that you have created inside the brep component and turn this off. After you have done this, let's move ahead with this particular piece of component. You can also double click and type point, bring in the point component. Now I'll explain why we brought in the point component. We are now about to contour this whole shape so that we get the steps that we want. So if I double click and type contour, as we have seen the contour component before, you get this particular component which says create a set of brep or mesh contours. You can bring this in. So it asks for the shape which we have over here, but it also asks for the point. From which point do you want to create the contour? So that's why we'll actually be selecting this particular point right here. This point on the top, we'll actually be selecting this point on the top. So let's select this and put it inside point, and you can turn this off. Now we have the brep, which is the shape, and the point over here. Now we need the direction and we need the distance of this particular component. So the direction is basically in the y direction. We need to contour it in the y axis over here. So if I go to the plan view or the top view, as you can see, this is the x axis, this is the y axis. I want to contour it in the y axis like this, and starting with this point. So I'll just go back to perspective view. So let's do that first. You can double click and bring in a y component, unit y, and put it inside direction, put this inside shape, put this inside point, and now let's give the distance. So let's give it a distance of 10 and see what happens first. So you can just double click and type 10 and put it inside distance, and there you go. You have your desired steps. You can decrease it, and this distance is basically the distance between these contours. So you can increase it and decrease it based on how much you actually want it. Maybe I'll keep it 6. I guess 6 is fine. After you're done with your distance, now you can just go ahead and extend this particular set of curves on both the sides. But first of all, we'll take at the data tree structure of this entire thing. So you can just double click and type panel and bring in the panel component, attach it to contours. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of zeros and this entire thing is grafted. So let's simplify it so that these extra zeros go away. So you can just delete the panel, right click on this and click on simplify. And now if you attach the panel again, you'll actually see that all the zeros are gone, and there you go. You have no extra zeros attached to its data tree structure now. Once you have simplified it, now you can actually double click and type extend. You can find the extend curve component. You can actually find this component under the curve tab under utilities, as you can see on the screen. So you can attach this to curve, and you can see that the wire is grafted. We have to keep it grafted because we want to extend every one of these curves. They have to be done only by one component so that we don't have to do it manually. So let's give the type as 0. So if you keep your mouse on type, it says type of extension. 0 means line, 1 means arc, and 2 means smooth. We want to extend it as straight lines. So let's double click and type 0 less than 1 less than 2. So it creates a number slider which contains only 0, 1 and 2, because those are the options that are over here. Keep it at 0, attach it to type. Now let's create start and end. So start can be something like 38. And your end can be something like 0, which you can change later. And as you do so, you see that you are allowed to extend these curves on this particular side using this number slider. If you want to extend it on the other side, you'll have to change this, but you can see that it's only extending on the other end. So you can totally play around with this based on how you actually want it. So I'll keep it at 0 for now, and I'll arrange all of these components a little bit using the align tool. Now after you're done with this much, you can actually go ahead and offset each of these curves. So you can double click and type offset and bring in the offset curve component. You can actually find this component over here under curve, under utilities, as you can see on the screen. You can put this inside curve, and as you can see, it's offsetting the curve, but it's offsetting it in the z-axis. As you can see, it's already offsetting it by default below the curve, right below it in the z-axis, as you can see, like this. But I hope you can also see that some of the curves are being offsetted on the top and the last one is being offsetted on the bottom. So if you want to fix that, what you can actually do is, firstly, we'll have to give it a distance of offset. So you can double click and type negative and bring in the negative component, attach it to distance, and then you can actually attach it to a number slider and give it something like 1.0. Give it a 000 value so that you have a distance. Now you can see all these curves have some kind of an offset. After you're done with this much, now what you can do is you can give it a plane to offset. So you can double click and type XZ and give it a XZ plane, because this plane right here, this is the XZ plane. This plane is where we want to offset all the curves. Give it the required plane, and you see that all the curves are now being offsetted accordingly, and all the curves now are being offsetted below. So before we gave it the plane, all the curves, some of the curves are being offsetted above and some below. But once you give it the plane, it sorts that error out. So once you're done offsetting all of the curves, what you can do is you can again attach a panel to this just to understand the data tree structure. See, the data tree structure is pretty weird over here. You have the numbers in the beginning, so we'll just go ahead and simplify this so that we clean out all the unnecessary data. You have really simple trees now, so I just delete this. After you're done with all of this, we can actually loft these curves and these curves now. We can loft both of them to create a surface so that we can extrude them in the y-axis and we can create solid steps. So you can double click and type loft, bring in the loft component. So this one goes in first and this one goes in second, and there you go. You see that all the curves are perfectly lofted and you have lofted surfaces now. And after you're done with this much, you can pretty much turn off everything else except for these lofted surfaces. Now after you're done, now what we can do is we can basically extrude them in the y-axis. So you can double click and type extrude and bring in the extrude component, and you can also double click and type y and bring in unit y, attach it to direction. And once you do so, you see it automatically extrudes because unit y has a factor of 1, but we actually need the exact distance that we want to extrude it by, and that exact distance will actually be the distance of the contours, because these are the distances that we are looking to extrude all of these solids by, and that is this particular distance. We have to extrude it by 6. So 6 goes inside factor, and there you go. We have our set of parametric steps that we actually want. You can also control the thickness of the steps using this. So I'll just select it and right click and change it to thickness. And I'll also select this number slider and right click and change it to number of steps. So I'll just decrease the thickness a little bit, something like 0.626. This looks much better now. So once you're done with this, let's go ahead and hide this. So now we have a perfectly parametrically controlled set of steps. So let's go ahead and give it some nice colors, and also let's give it some nice outline. So you can actually double click and type custom preview like we have been doing till now. Bring in the custom preview component, double click and type swatch, and bring in a color swatch. And you can attach this to geometry, give it nice dark gray color. After you do that, you can also double click and create another component which is known as VDEP edges. You can bring this particular component which says VDEP edges, which extracts the edge curves of a VDEP. So you have the naked curves, the interior curves, and the non-manifold curves. What we'll be needing are the interior curves. So let's go ahead and give the interior curves a custom preview. Just copy this and give the interior curves a white color, something like this, and I'll turn this component off. And there you go. We have a perfect set of parametrically controlled steps, parametrically created steps. You can turn off everything else except for these custom previews. Now we can actually go to the rendered viewport and actually understand how this is looking. So since this goes inside our ground plane, it is actually giving a little bit of a glitch, but that's completely fine. You can actually minimize this, go to rendering, and click on ground plane settings and click on this particular thing. You can actually set it a little bit lower, and as you can see, the error is now gone. Now let's go back and open up our Grasshopper window. Now what you can do is you can actually play around with the script and see how it works out now. You can go ahead to the beginning of the script where you can use this to change the dimensions, to change the form of your steps. So what if I want steps like this? We have all seen steps like this. You can also change the Y size, which will in turn change all of these things. You can see some errors happening over there. Make sure you have it in place. You can also go ahead and change these values, which will change the heights of the steps. You can change the curvatures of your steps just like this. Make sure not to increase it too much, otherwise it will give an error of something like this. Although this is pretty nice, you can have something like this. Pretty interesting design. So after you are happy with your design, you can just bake it if you want to. For now, I'll just turn both of these off, and I'll right click and turn off the render so that the render is gone. And I'll also right click and bake this and make sure to group it. And I have a nice set of parametric steps ready in Rhino. So if I change my background from white to maybe light gray or dark gray, I can actually visualize it much better. So this is it for this particular topic. In the next topic, we'll be taking a look at how to create a shell structure designed by Felix Candela.